Christa Wathen first came on my radar in a manner that many people seem to pop up in my life these days, via social media, Twitter to be exact. If you follow her feed, you might know that this Latina is a former banker who now resides in Stockholm, Sweden, where she is pursuing a Ph.D. in archaeology. And since I'm always in search of a good story, she was right up my alley. And I wasn't wrong. As it turns out, Crista is a former third culture kid, which I discovered in the process, who was raised in the Bahamas before moving to Florida. I would argue moving to Florida is a transition for anyone, much less someone coming from an international location. And when I mean Florida, I mean Northern Florida, aka not Miami. That move led to some challenges, including the discovery that she was suffering from hearing loss. But despite that discovery, Crista didn't let that stop her from pursuing her dream opportunities. In this episode, you will learn more about that transition to the U.S. and the accompanying cultural shock that comes with identity, nationality, and ethnicity. She opens up about her experiences living and traveling as a hearing impaired individual. She also reveals why she made that change from finance to studying and living in Sweden. She is a numbers person after all, so you can bet money played a role. The name of her brand is the Richful Thinker, and as you will hear, that title is more than apt to describe her. Welcome to the Global Chatter.
No, it's okay. All right. We have started our latest episode of the Global Chatter, and I think this is going to be a good one. Now, to be fair, I say that about every episode, but I have yet to be wrong. So I think this is going to be a great episode. Christa, welcome to the Global Chatter.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Look, here's the thing. Like whenever I start these episodes, and I've said this in the intro, so they would have already heard this. I get really excited when I see third culture kids out in the wild. And I was saying that before we got on. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation because I'm really excited to sort of hear your experiences and your life in Sweden and kind of the things that happened before Sweden. So we're just going to jump in. So here's the deal. I asked this question of everybody. Where does your international story start? So where does it begin?
I guess I will have to start with the day I was born.
Well, there you go.
Because I was born in the U.S., but at the time, my parents were living in the Bahamas. And so it was just easier because my mom's Honduran and my dad is American. So I would have been a U.S. citizen anyway. But my parents did not want to deal with the embassy. So they were just like, you know what? She's going to be American anyway. She'll just be born in the States.
Wow. Okay.
And then after about, I think my parents are a bit iffy on the timeline, but a few weeks later, I officially moved back to the Bahamas. And then I was raised there. So that's the short story.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So of course, because we're in the winter, it's like winter in the Northern Hemisphere or getting into winter. The Bahamas sounds lovely. How long did you live in the Bahamas for?
Up until I was age 11, 12.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the reason that took your family there?
My dad just found work there, and then he actually still works there. So, I mean, I still have like family there, I guess, and I can still go and visit and everything. So it's not like I haven't lost that attachment. It's just that it's a little different now.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess like the interesting question is, your mom is Honduran. So do you know where they met? Where did your parents meet?
They met in Honduras.
Okay. So
yeah, my dad decided to do a study abroad in Honduras of all places. And then, and then he met my mom who studied English in the States. And so she spoke English with a Bostonian accent because she learned English in Boston. And he was just like, why am I meeting this Honduran girl with a Bostonian accent?
Which, if you're American, you know, Bostonian accents are really particular.
Exactly.
That's hilarious. So I don't know what's funnier, the fact that your dad studied abroad, like real talk. I don't know how many people even now are like, I'm going to study abroad in Honduras.
Yeah.
And so the fact that your father did that, or that your mom had this accent, was your father, was there a particular reason he wanted to go to Honduras, or was it just like, it's close?
He said he had a lot of friends who he went to school with at university who were from Honduras. And he was like, what the hell?
Oh,
let's go see where they're from.
Okay, your father sounds kind of hilarious, actually.
He has his moments.
Wow. And so that's where they met. And then where did they go from there? Did they go to the Bahamas? They came to the States? What'd they do?
They eventually came to the States, and then a few years later, they went to the Bahamas. And then they kept flying back and forth to Honduras so my mom could see her family and everything. But it was pretty much they were mostly living in the Bahamas. And then when they decided it was time for me and my brother to go to school in the States, they moved us to the States then.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. What do you remember growing up in the Bahamas? Like, what was life like for you there?
You know how you put everything in rose-colored glasses?
Yes.
And then you go back, and then you're just like, like, it was really nice. But when I went back, I realized how much I was missing because it's such a touristy place. And a lot of the stuff, like experiences and everything, are geared towards tourists. So as a local, you don't really have... you have, things to do, of course. I'm not saying you don't, but you rely on other countries, like, say, the U.S., to get things. So I remember having to go to the States to buy clothes. I remember having to go to the States to sometimes buy cereals because they were too expensive. And, like things like that. So it was a good childhood, and I had a really nice time growing up and everything. But I do remember things being so expensive, everything being towards tourists, which is it good? Yeah. Because you kind of lose the culture in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually thank you for sharing that, because I think sometimes, especially with third culture kids, I have this conversation with folks. Do we remember things better than they really were? And is it partially because, you're a child?
Yes.
So there's just things in the world you don't know, right?
Yes.
Or is it, no, things aren't the way we thought they were. It just, because of whatever privileges we had, it just seemed better, or things just look different than maybe as an adult. Yeah. And so, I wondered about that, especially living in an area that you're right, that is catered to tourists, because I feel that way about Las Vegas, right? Like everybody goes to Vegas to have fun on the Strip.
Yeah.
But then there are people who live in Las Vegas who are like, I never go to the Strip.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
but do riddle me this. It being the Bahamas and you have finite space with an island, what did you do for fun as a kid? Like, was it just playing with other kids? What could you do?
It was definitely playing with other kids. I had a few other neighbors that we used to hang around with and everything. So you were able to find kids your age. I never really hung out with any tourist kids. Not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just that they were usually... Yeah. And the hotels had these bands. So you couldn't enter the hotel unless you had that band. And so all the other kids had those bands, and, we did it because we're not.
Because we're local.
Yeah. But I do remember we used to play outside, of course, like 90s kids and everything. And then, but I just remember being outside all year round, aside from the cold months. And I say cold because they're not really cold.
Right. No, I feel you. Like, right. I mean, I grew up in sub-Saharan Africa, right?
Yeah.
So this thing called winter, I still am like, I don't know why we do this, but I get. So yeah.
To experience the season is what I tell myself.
Whatever. I don't need it. I don't need it at all. And you know what's funny? Everywhere I have lived, I realize this as an adult. Even in the US, I've only lived where it's warm. Like I refuse to live where it's. And then I went abroad as an adult. I lived abroad, and I lived in the Middle East, and it was hot because I was in the Gulf.
Yeah,
so I was in the desert. Like I just refuse to go where it's cold.
That's
so.
That's
Oh
the
my
opposite
goodness.
for me. I've only ended up in cold places, and every time I'm like, why? Why?
Why am
do you do this to yourself?
So let me ask you this question. So this is the inevitable question of every third culture kid. You've lived in this country for about 10 years or so. You've grown up, right? And then you go, and I always put in quotes, home, because that's a moving target for all of us. What state did you move to?
Florida.
Okay, so
yeah,
temperature-wise, not the worst.
No.
Right?
No,
Okay.
it's about the same.
What was the experience living in Florida? So to think back, leaving the Bahamas, and now you are a Floridian. What was that like for you?
Oh my God. When I was living in the Bahamas, I went to Bahamian school. So all my friends were Bahamian, and I had a very strong Bahamian accent, which sometimes comes out when I get upset or when I drink a little too much. But it happens. So when I moved to the States, I had this really strong accent, and nobody could understand a word I was saying at all. And the worst part of it is that when I said I was from a different country, everybody was like, because it was kind of a small-ish town, I guess you could say. It's not really small anymore, but people were like, oh, the Bahamas. Like, they would ask all these questions and everything. And it made me feel more like an outsider. And so I never felt like an outsider in the Bahamas. I never did. Yeah. And even when I go back and I see my friends, I still don't feel like an outsider. Sometimes they joke around and call me, oh, the tourist. But because technically I am now. So, I mean, fair enough. But in the States, or in Florida, I never felt Floridian.
Yeah.
I always felt somewhat outside of the whole group. It's like, oh, she's not really one of us because she has all these other experiences than us that we don't relate to, and she doesn't relate to us because it's not the same. And so I tried my best to, acclimate myself, change my accent a little bit to sound more like them. But in the end, I don't feel, sometimes I tell people I have, when they ask me where I'm from, it's always a difficult question for me to answer. Because technically, I'm not from anywhere. I'm almost from everywhere. You know, it's kind of hard to say. So sometimes, depending on who I'm talking to, I will say Florida. Because it's an easy answer. I don't get any more questions. That's it. And sometimes I just don't want to be asked more questions.
Same. Same. But here's what happened. So when I was in where was I flying? Brazil. Yeah. And there was an American couple, and I was just excited that someone spoke English, right? Because I'd been traveling through South America. Yeah. And they were like, where are you from? And I was too lazy to say Richmond, Virginia, because if you're not American, it doesn't mean anything to you. So I would say where I was born, which is DC, Washington, DC. And they went, oh my gosh, where in Washington, D.C.? Like, we're from, and they were like from the area. And I went, oh crap, you actually know, I forgot, you know stuff. This is really where I'm from. And so, I have that moment too, where I'm like, I'm too lazy to explain and I don't feel like it. Yeah. So can I ask a sort of a different question then with that? Yeah. I'm curious. So if we take you back to that age and people are wondering, okay, you lived in the Bahamas. Did that take people kind of aback? Because I assume some people would be like, well, isn't the Bahamas a predominantly Black country? So if you said you were from the Bahamas.
I had several Mean Girls moments. So when I saw that on the screen in grade 9, I was just like, did they like read my diary?
But you're not Black. How could you be from the Bahamas?
It's like,
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I never knew how to respond to that because I was just like, okay, what do you want me to say?
No, but it's such a funny like remark when people do that, because you can live somewhere and not be the same race or ethnicity, or you could live somewhere and be a different ethnicity and still be from that place, but people just can't. They can't.
They can't fathom it.
Like, and so okay, so but here's then my second question. You being in Florida now, your mother's Honduran, so she's Latina.
Yes,
is your father, or he is not?
He's just white.
He's just like, okay, okay, that's fair. That's totally.
He's a British descent American, essentially. Okay. So, I mean, that's...
Okay. He's just Caucasian. Okay. Yeah. So was there ever... I mean, because I think this is a question particularly folks of color when they come to the United States. Was there ever questions about your identity, right? So I always talk about even being Black, but growing up in a predominantly Black country, when I came back to the States, sort of going... There's a lot of things I don't know because I wasn't here, right?
Yeah.
Culturally.
Yeah.
Did you ever face that with someone who you have a Latina identity and they're like, but I don't understand? Like,
I remember it being more of a thing when I moved to the States. Yes. I think when I was growing up in the Bahamas, it wasn't really a thing. I mean, people knew, but I think it might have been because everybody knew who my mom was and everybody knew who my dad was. So nobody ever asked any other questions. They just never said anything. But when I moved to the States, all of a sudden we were the new kids on the block. And all of a sudden people were asking us these questions. And people would always, I mean, not always, but every once in a while, there were some instances where they would see my mom and they would be like, are you adopted? Or then they'll like, eventually they'll see my dad. They're like, oh, I can see why you're so white now. And I'm always like,
sorry, I'm not.
I don't, and it's always.
The U.S. is so awkward with this. Like,
yes, like, and I'm just like,
I don't know why we're like the most, and I'm not saying other countries always handle race right, but like we either ask or we assume. Like, the worst is when we just assume.
Like, and I'm just like, yeah, and?
So was the idea that you were, correct me if I'm wrong, was the idea that you were too pale to be Latina? Is that what people thought you were too?
Yeah. It was, I remember what year was it? I think it was sometime in high school, and so I would have been like 14 or 15 at this age, and it was St. Patrick's Day rolled around, and I never celebrated St. Patrick's Day. I just I don't get it.
I mean, there's no reason to.
Yeah, unless you're Irish, I guess. But
but apparently Americans celebrate it harder than the the Irish do.
And somebody had asked, they were like, oh, at one point my nickname ended up being Ireland, because they're like, oh, you must be Irish because you look so Irish. And of course, I'm just like, you know, you guys, y'all are the strangest bunch.
They've never seen an Irish person and decided that you look like what could be Irish. So funny. I'm not surprised. I'm just like, it sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Yeah. It's always awkward. And I think some Americans are very awkward about it.
I mean, yes, that's the nice way of saying it. And because I tell people, and I've said this in previous episodes, that I probably had to think more about identity when I came back to the States than probably in any other situation, just because we we need to have people in boxes so
Yeah.
that for whatever reason, so we can understand. And so, you know, when people would ask me, well, why do you live abroad? Whenever I lived abroad and came back, people would be like, oh, was your family in the military? Like, they didn't even ask why.
Yeah.
Same. They're just like, oh, were you in the military? And you're like, yeah, in the Bahamas.
Yeah, because there's a base in the Bahamas, you know.
Right.
Nobody gets sent there. That's actually the worst place to go.
Right. But there's such assumptions. And I feel the hardest part of a third culture kid is always having to explain repeatedly your story, especially to people who may or may not met. I hate to say it, but may or may not met, right? Like you just met them and you're like, I don't want to go into why, what.
Exactly. Which is why I just settle on Florida at this point. Because, you know, they ask no more questions. I one time said, it was actually in Sweden. I didn't want to explain. I just said, oh, I'm from the U.S. And then they started asking me which state. And I'm just like, clearly said the country. Just, I don't want to talk to you.
And then did you tell them Florida eventually?
Yeah.
And were they like, oh my
Florida?
gosh.
They're like, oh, okay. And then they
Are you
said
from Miami?
Yes. And it's just like,
you know what? I didn't even ask because I've been to Florida and I know Florida is very different. What part of Florida did you guys move to?
Oh, you know Gainesville?
Oh my
we were
God.
in the area.
Oh my God. No offense to anyone from Gainesville, but that's North Florida, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Panhandle?
Not quite.
Not quite Panhandle?
Not quite. It's
Panhandle adjacent?
I guess so, but you kind of have to still like, it's like Panhandle's like 2 hours away.
Okay. So you're not quite.
No, I would say more it's southern Georgia than anything else.
That's yeah. That's the running joke.
I might get attacked for saying that, but you know what? I stand by that.
You're in Europe, you're fine. The people that attack you are not going to go that far. Oh my God. Wow. Okay. Do you ever have to explain Gainesville to people? Or you're just like, you wouldn't. Do you just let it be? Right.
I don't go any further than that. Usually Florida is usually the end, and they say Miami, and I'm just like, oh yeah, Miami's nice.
And then
that's nice. And then that's it. And it doesn't go any further. And then usually, especially in Europe, it doesn't matter which country they're from, really. They'll say Miami, and they're like, oh, I've been to Miami, I really like it. And they'll start telling me about all these other places in the U.S. they've been to, and I'm just like,
perfect. We're off of my Florida story.
We're not talking about me anymore. Great.
So here's something I want to bring up. I read this in your blog, and I would love to sort of hear your experiences. So I was reading your post, and you mentioned that it was when you came back to the States that you started to know you got tested and noticed there was hearing loss. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So prior to coming to the States, did you notice any changes? Like, was it something? Wow. Okay.
It's the same thing with the glasses. I had no idea I needed glasses until I went to the doctor, and they were like, she needs glasses. And I was like, oh, so that's why we so close to the board.
Oh no.
And I just, you're a child. And so like, I was never really, that's the wrong way to say it, but I never really said anything to my parents. Like I never complained about anything. My brother was always the one who said stuff like, oh, my eyes hurt, I have a headache or whatever. Mm-hmm. And me, I was always just
even keel.
It is what it is. And I did not see it being as abnormal. Mm-hmm. So I guess because I had no base beforehand, like I didn't notice my eyes getting progressively worse or anything, or my hearing getting progressively worse, because it was always there, I guess.
Yeah. No, I got you.
Yeah. And so when we went to the States and finally got hearing tested, and it was like, oh, but that makes sense.
So was it hearing? I know they do this in the US. So you know how schools will definitely test for hearing. Was it just like a normal, the school did a test, or was it?
It was the school.
It was the school. Okay.
Yeah. I remember them coming in and doing that whole like, where they bring in that big machine and they make you sit in listen to the sounds or whatever. And apparently I didn't get any of the sounds.
Wow.
I thought I was just sat in a quiet room. I had no idea what was going on.
That's the first sign.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And the doctor was like, she needs to see a specialist or whatever. So, and yeah.
And so what was there a reason behind, like, did they know what was the cause, or is it just?
It's just genetics, I guess.
Wow.
Unfortunate genetics.
So then here's my question for you. You've returned to the US, I guess, and you get this news. How does that sort of change your your not transition experience, but kind of in the community you're living in, like why I'm having a brain fart. Integration. Like, did that change your experiences as you were, or it was just another thing?
I think I was just quiet because nobody understood what I was saying in the first place. Because I would ask questions and people would not really respond to me anyway. So I just kind of talked less.
No.
But I didn't really notice anything. And it wasn't until high school that I realized it was because my parents didn't give me hearing aids or anything because I essentially refused to get them. I was like, no, it's fine or whatever. My parents were just like, okay, the doctor says you're okay for now anyway, so just stay away from loud noises, I guess. Okay. And it wasn't until high school when things started getting really bad because I would miss out half the conversations that people were saying, and then I would answer back, and it would be either I missed the whole conversation or they were talking about something completely different, and then it got awkward. And I think, to be honest, I think it did actually hurt my whole integration because I wasn't able to socialize in the same way. I just became an awkward kid who tried to stop talking but wanted to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You know what? I think that is actually a really good stopping point because we're going to go to break and then we're going to pick up on, okay, what happens when the TCK grows up and decides to go abroad?
Okay.
So let's just hold on for the break and we'll be back after these messages.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was laughing off the air because Christa dropped some information that I think is super important. She's covering her face, but I'm going to say this anyway. So I learned that she studied abroad at the University of Florida. If you're not from Florida or you're not from the States, that's in Gainesville. So she did stay at home in terms of where she grew up after living in the Bahamas. But here's my favorite part of this. She mentioned she studied abroad. And would you like to tell the people where you studied abroad, or should I tell the people where you studied abroad?
I could tell them. I went to Ireland.
Because the non-Irish chick who moved to Gainesville and everyone thought she was Irish ironically goes to Ireland. And let me not poo-poo on it. I've heard Ireland is gorgeous. And so it is what it is. But was that your first, was that kind of your first young adult travel experience on your own, or had you traveled to other places internationally?
Oh, that was definitely my first one.
Yeah.
I had been on, obviously I had been on planes before. And when I went to visit, when I went home back to the Bahamas, like during breaks when I was living in the States, I always flew on planes and sometimes I was alone. So it wasn't, but I never count that as my international because it wasn't going to a new place.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But Ireland was your first, like, I am going abroad. How long were you there, for a year or for semester or summer?
It was for a semester.
Yeah. What was?
I just did some archaeology stuff.
And so, what was your experiences living in Ireland? Because I know that sometimes for folks who come from, I know this is really basic, but they'll come from countries where they speak the same languages, and like especially if they're Western countries, and you're like, oh, it's going to be just like living in the US or Canada. Was it different, or was it, it was just what it was?
It was different, The accent I did not have a hard time with, as some people did. It was, I mean, it's a very loose comparison. Just to clear it up, it's a very loose comparison, but it was almost like listening to almost like hearing the Bahamian accent.
I can understand almost. That. I can understand that.
Had the lilts and everything, and then instead of pronouncing the TH, they pronounced just the T. So tree instead of three, etc. I mean, obviously, I had a fantastic experience there, and it really broadened my horizons in a way that I don't think I would have if I went somewhere else. I felt like I could finally be an adult for the first time. It was a good time.
What did you study in college?
I'm an archaeologist.
Okay. And so,
yeah, still am.
Still are, which is why you're in Sweden. By the way, I feel like you're the first archaeologist I've met. Of course, my first thought is Indiana Jones, but not. Was he an archaeologist though?
I mean, he did a lot of things that were wrong.
I'm not saying they were
I would
right.
Say.
But
yeah.
So you were an archaeology major, and then you went to you went to Ireland, and I know that eventually you would do your graduate degree in the UK, correct?
Yes.
How did you go straight after undergrad, or was there some time in between?
There was a little bit of time in between. I think wasn't that much time. I applied in my final year because I finished in December for my undergrad, and so I applied when the applications were due. I think in October or something, and then I got accepted in April, and then I was in the UK the next. So it was Ireland, and then graduation, and then acceptance, and then moving again.
Were you studying archaeology at the graduate level? Because I know you had a bit of a career switch. Okay, so academically, you've been on this archaeology train for a minute.
Yeah, I did. When I did my undergrad, I started off with nursing.
Oh.
So I did my first 2 years in nursing, and then I was like, this ain't my jam. And then I switched.
What sparked the interest in archaeology?
I've always been interested in archaeology. It was always, but I just never thought it was a plausible thing to do. And my parents, obviously, they wanted me to pursue something like law or economy or something, not archaeology.
Right.
And but when I went home, because in the States it's called anthropology. When I went home one day and I said I was changing my major to anthropology, my parents were like, "Oh, okay." And
they
then,
didn't know what that was.
but I guess they didn't. No, but I think they just thought like, "Oh, she'll change her mind. It'll be fine." You know, she changes her mind regularly, and I didn't change my mind on that. So,
how long were you in the UK for doing your graduate degree?
The graduate degree is a year, but I was there for a year and a half. Just trying to find out where my next step was, and I ended up moving back to the States for a few years. Which was okay. And that's when I worked in finance, is when I moved back to the States.
Did you move back to Florida, or did you go somewhere else?
Yes.
Okay, so
I went right back to Florida. I went back to the same house, in the same town. I mean, my options were limited at the time.
Y'all can't see her face, but she's just like, man, I just came from Europe and I'm back in Gainesville.
And the thing is, I told my parents, it's like, I am not going to come back. When I was living in the UK, I was like, I am not going to go back to Florida. I'm not going to go back to Gainesville. I'm going to move to like anywhere else in the US. Okay. And then, you need money for that. And so I moved back home because my parents were going to be like, well, you can stay here for a while until you figure out your next step and everything. So. And then I found a job in Gainesville. So
let's talk about that. So you worked in, how long did you work in finance for?
2.5 years.
Okay. This is where I'm intrigued, because you've got a brand called the Richful Thinker, which is particularly focused on finance and debt reduction and information. And I think it's especially helpful for everyone, but I think it's also helpful if you are younger and you're also getting started in all these things.
Yeah.
Was that sort of the catalyst for that, or was it really more what was just going on in your life and you?
It was things that I saw when I was in working in finance. Because I was front facing, and I would deal with people from I wouldn't say all sorts of incomes, but generally lower to middle income, and I was watching some of them struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like I could help in what way I could, but I obviously had to have the backing of the bank behind me, and I could only do things their way.
Yeah.
If I wanted to do anything. And so when I moved to Sweden, I realized that there was an opening that maybe I could try and fill for some of these people who still think they needed some help. And if people wanted the help, then they could, ask or whatever. It wasn't really, I just was like, I didn't want people to continue struggling in the way they were, essentially. Yeah.
So I know. So that kind of leads me to this question. You are in Sweden because you're currently pursuing a Ph.D. in archaeology.
Yes.
Was that part of your financial strategy, or was it just the program that worked for you, or you just wanted to live in Sweden?
It was pretty much all of the above. Moving, I wanted to move to Scandinavia, really. And I had been to Denmark, and I had spent 4 hours in Sweden, but it's not really anything to you don't really get to know anything. So I hadn't been in Sweden for that long. And originally there was a project that came out when I was working, and I wanted to be on that project. It was so interesting. And that's what got me into thinking, because at the time I wanted to go back to the UK for my PhD at the time. I hadn't really looked elsewhere in Europe. But then this program came up, and I looked at it and I applied for it. I got rejected, unfortunately, but I was like, whatever, move on. It happens. And I applied the following year, which is when they accepted me. And I knew that they would allow me to pick my own project. So I could, essentially be the equivalent of an early stage researcher and create my own project. And it would be, all on me, which I wanted. And then I would also have the financial backing to be able to pursue that project. I wouldn't have to go and search for funding and apply for all these grants and everything, which is what would happen if I went to some other places. Mm-hmm. So that was part of it was kind of like all the above. And I just wanted to experience what it was like in Scandinavia. People always talk so highly about it. And I was like, oh, let's go see what they're about. So
I mean, I guess with what you're studying and where you are, do you find that people often ask you about how they can study abroad or to do a degree outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, I get messages from mostly on Instagram about how I did it, what kind of programs they could do. Is there a specific way that they could look for or whatever? But I send them some links whenever they ask, how to get started and everything. But, and if they're doing archaeology, then I have even more links because I know all the websites and all the funding websites. There's a lot more build out because that's what I'm in.
Yeah.
But if they ask for other fields, then I can always send things. But it's usually if they ask, and I'm like, okay, well, here you go. Here's
all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's what I have.
What do you think? I mean, just in terms of financial education, because I know you are part of, and I'm going to ask you to explain the acronym, kind of focus on the FIRE movement. And so for those who don't know what that is, that stands for
Financial Independence, Retire Early.
Okay. So I feel like that's kind of self-evident, really, in the sense that I assume that's probably a goal of yours.
However, I'm doing it a little bit differently because if people want to retire early, that's, on them. It's more of a personal decision for me. I am more of I want to have long vacations, mini retirements, essentially. I want to be able to, go on a 6-month vacation, a year-long vacation, and just, and then come back to work because I do love archaeology. It's not if I had chose a different degree, maybe I'd feel a little differently, but I chose the field that I loved. So I feel like doing mini retirements would be more of a better idea for me. And then I wanted to be financially independent because there are going to be some times where, there might be lulls in my career only because I'm applying for grants and, trying to move on to the next thing. And I wanted to be prepared for that. And I also want to be picky about where I'll be next. I don't want to take the first thing.
It's really interesting because I think with your field, you could be anywhere in the world, right? I mean, the door is, for all we know, you could be in Jordan, right? You could be.
Yeah, I could go pretty much almost anywhere.
Right, and doing the work. How do you take the financial principles in terms of this program and take it wherever you are? So are there things that you have to do different? Like one of the challenges, for example, for a lot of young Americans, and honestly, a lot of older Americans, are student loans, right? And so I know we've gotten questions with the work that I do with the Black expat. I mean, I'm just gonna put this out here because this question came up in the middle of COVID, where people would say, "Hey, I want to move abroad. Can I just not pay my student loan?" I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm like, no, but that's not the plan.
That's not how it works.
And so I assume you're getting those questions too, where people are like, "Oh, you're in Sweden. Did you get away from whatever debt that you had?"
It's like, no, I did not. It's still there.
So how do you, how are you able to sort of stay on your financial goals, even though you are somewhere else? And I'm assuming, of course, dealing with different currencies, different financial responsibilities. Is it easier? Is it more difficult? Is it just a matter of being organized? Like how are you as a student basically able to do this?
I would actually say in Sweden, it's a lot easier for me to do it because one, I get paid a salary here because it's just how they pay PhDs here because you're essentially researching and everything and doing work. So you get paid here. And I live in student housing because I'm eligible for that. And it's like half the price of what it would be in normal housing because otherwise I'd be half my income. And I just transfer the money over what I need to send over every month, or sometimes I'll save up every 3 months and then send it all off to the US and then pay it off, whatever it is then. But I feel like I didn't have this experience when I lived in the UK because I had student loans when I was in the UK. So I didn't have to pay it while I was there. But I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but in Sweden at least, because in European countries, because in Sweden, everything's taken care of socially. So I don't have to worry about any additional debt as to like healthcare or anything like that. And I live in the city, and so I don't have to worry about a car. I don't have to. So technically, those expenses have dropped for me. So with that money, I'm not, I guess, spending on those items. I can actually save it and send it off or invest it or whatever I calculate is appropriate. So I feel like it's easier, in my experience, to pay them while living abroad.
Because it sounds like your quality of life is better. Exactly. So you don't have to, right. I mean, I think for those of us, for example, who are in the US, the challenge is so many places in the States need a car.
Yeah.
That's like to get to a job, to get anywhere. And then if there's no bus route, there's no metro. I mean, Gainesville, I'm pretty sure you need a car.
The nearest bus stop was, if I walked quick, it was 45 minutes away. Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
so if I walked really quickly.
I don't even know where no, I do know where the bus stop is near me, and it's not close. It's not close at all. So so if you don't have those expenses, and obviously you are on a budget, that's the key part of anything, I think, then you're able to make it. Let me flip this question around because we talked about this a little bit earlier. obviously there are a lot of people in England, in Sweden who speak English.
Yeah.
But then
Yes.
I would assume everything is also first in Swedish, right?
Yes.
As someone who, in your case, you have experienced hearing loss, is it more of a challenge when you travel trying to navigate, or is it you figured out a system that just works for you, especially in countries where you may not speak the language?
And usually I wear my hearing aids, so it kind of helps or whatever. But if I don't have them on, then I live in a very quiet world, which I like. I'm very used to it. So it's kind of one of those things. Whenever I put my hearing aids on, I'm just like, oh, I can hear everything.
Right. I hear it all.
And I'm just like, ooh, I don't like that anymore.
Same.
But I have gotten used to. I'm trying to think. Like, I've never really had any problems, to be honest. When it comes to most of the countries that I have visited, they speak one of the languages I speak. So I speak Spanish as well.
Okay.
So I haven't had any problems. I think the only place I had a problem was in France because I do not speak French, and it's easier. It was easier for me to get by with Spanish in France than it was for me to do English.
Understood.
Yeah, because it's a Romance language and everything. Yeah. But I wouldn't say I had too many issues. I think if I went to a place where it's a completely different language, like the writing is a different language, then I think maybe I'd have a little more difficulty. But not really.
Very cool. We talk a lot about sort of the way people navigate both with physical concerns and visible and non-visible, or visible and invisible. And so I was always wondered how, if there's something that's nuanced to your experience. But so far, you've also been in countries where you speak the language, and I think that makes a big difference, to be very honest.
Yeah, I think the only issue is when you're trying to learn a language, which is where I'm having problems with. Yeah. But and that has to do with the hearing.
Yeah.
But I don't think if you're in there for just a few days, haven't noticed any problems. I'm not really talking to anyone anyway, so.
Are you learning Swedish? Or do you know Swedish?
Yes.
You are learning Swedish?
I'm learning it. I can have a small conversation, like at work or whatever, but I can't do like a presentation of my research or anything like that.
You're not. So. Although, to be fair, sometimes it's hard to do it in English. So, what do you like about living in Sweden as it compares to living in the States or maybe even the UK?
I really had to say the social aspects. I always upset people from the UK about this, but I had a very bad experience with the NHS. So I don't like them. And I won't get into why, because that's a whole thing. But in Sweden, I have had no problems with the healthcare system. I was able to actually get seen. They actually listened to my problems. And I was actually able to get whatever it was fixed on time. And I got paid sick leave as well. So you could get 80% of your income, depending on where your income is. So you get 80% of that, and then you're able to survive on that for however time you need to be on sick leave. And that is something I never got in the States. I got 5 days. I didn't get 30 vacation days here. And when I found out about that, I was just like,
did you cry?
30 days? What do I do with 30 days? And now I'm like, I'm too spoiled. I can't go back to 10 days.
You cannot come back to this. I mean, but you know what though? That's the biggest challenge, even on the financial scale, right? In the US, medical issues, right? Medical concerns, medical health care. That's one of the biggest chunks of why people go into debt and declare bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
It's because of medical care. So yeah. And then on top of that, to be able to have days off without feeling like there's repercussions, not everyone gets that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think like part of the whole I've talked to other Americans I know here about this, and apparently it's still, and I've talked to other Europeans I know as well, and they all have noticed this, that the Americans will wait until the last possible moment to go to the hospital, or they'll avoid going to the hospital, because it's essentially ingrained in them. You only go when it's, you're about to die.
Literally.
Because,
literally.
Because you don't want to, exactly, you don't want to have that massive bill or whatever. And I guess it still kind of is retained when you come abroad, I guess, because
we're conditioned, right? We're just like, I don't want to pay that bill.
There we go, conditioned. Yeah,
it's got to be really bad before we decide to go, and that's really sad, actually, because you're trying to do it is preventative. You're not trying to be like reactive. And I need this, right? What do you in terms of just even studying in Sweden, do you find that it's just you're getting your doctorate, so it is a little bit different. Is it just a different experience than when you were at UF in Florida?
Yeah, 100%. Not just because of just the level of studies or whatever. Also, at one point I was like a supervisor to essentially a bachelor student here in Sweden. And I talked to them about their experience of being a bachelor student and everything. And the main things is essentially cheaper if you're a citizen. And the girl told me she had student loans, and I can't remember exactly what her interest rate was, but that was the part that shocked me the most. I think it was like 1% or less than 1%.
Wow!
And it gets forgiven if you never make a certain income, make above a certain income or something. And this is years ago when she told me all this, so I don't remember the exact details. But I was just like, excuse me?
First of all, 1% isn't a thing. Like, what? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's only 3 years depending on which program you're in as well. So you only have and it's completely focused on what you want to study. So you don't do the whole first 2 years that you have to do in the US or anything like that. So I mean, there's plus and positives to it, because I think those 2 years are very important. It's a personal opinion. Mm-hmm. But it's way different.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1% though. I'm stuck on even on the lowest day, the lowest I've ever seen is 2.3, 2.5.
Yeah. You saw 2.3. Okay. Because the lowest I've ever seen is like 5%.
Because, okay. I'm probably older than you then, because I have seen, like, on loans that were taken out a while ago. Yeah. I've seen 2%, 2-3% on federal loans. Yeah.
Okay.
On federal loans. Mm-hmm.
Dang. Okay.
I'm not saying they always stay there, but but it has been.
But
either way,
it's unreal. Yeah.
Is the cost of the degree you're doing overall just cheaper in Sweden comparatively?
Yeah, I don't have to pay tuition or anything.
Oh yes, that's the thing.
Yeah, I don't have I mean, if I have to buy books, then I buy books, but I could usually buy them. I could usually borrow them from the library, or everything's almost. I don't know how it is for master's students or undergrads exactly, but for me, I just have to I don't have to buy anything. I don't have to pay for tuition. But I think if I did an undergrad degree as a U.S. citizen, I would have to pay.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much it is. I think it's still cheaper than some places in the US.
Yeah. whatever it is, I feel like eyes closed, it's still cheaper than what you have to pay in the US.
That's why I went to the UK, because it was cheaper than being in the US for my master's degree.
There's a part of me that wishes I did my graduate degrees not in the US. I mean, if you can even get into I think if you can even get into Canada in some cases, it could still be cheaper than doing it in the US, depending on what the program is. But that's just one of those things. So as I wrap up, I like to ask this question. There are 3 questions I like to ask folks. They're never the same question, but I call it the lightning round because I like to hear what the guests are thinking. So no stress, just Whatever comes to your mind. Oh, okay, good. You actually look excited. All right. First question. If it is your first time in Sweden, so if someone's visiting Sweden for the first time, what's one thing they should absolutely do?
If they go to Stockholm, they need to go to this bakery called Vetekatten, and they need to get a cinnamon bun, because it is, if you're coming from the US, it is very different from cinnamon, and it's much better than cinnamon.
Okay, that was very particular. And no, she's not a sponsor. That was very particular. Number 2, what is one piece of financial advice you would give to someone who's thinking about studying abroad?
Apply for as many international grants as possible. If you do not think you're eligible for it, apply for it anyway. Because the worst thing they can tell you is no, and the best thing they can tell you is yes. And sometimes they have to give it to somebody, and if only a few people apply, they'll give it to the most eligible person, and it might be you. So just apply.
All right, final question. So, subtracting any of the other places you have been or traveled to, what's the next country you'd like to go to?
I really want to visit Croatia.
Yeah. If they listen, oh my gosh! So last season, the very last episode, my editor interviewed me. Long story short, she currently is in Croatia, and then we got on a whole tangent about the Czech Republic. But yes, Croatia is definitely up there. Why Croatia?
It just seems so. It seems like the cheaper version of Italy. You know, and it just seems like it has, I don't know, I like to go to play, I really like Eastern Europe. I know that's not the Eastern Europe, but I like that part of Europe. It's less touristy. You're able to find more local things to do, and you're actually able to, because that kind of like comes from my childhood. I hated being surrounded by touristy things. Yeah. Hated it. So I think I always search for countries in which it's less touristy as possible. Unfortunately, Croatia is becoming a very big deal, and so I'm being less inclined to go because I'm afraid it's going to be too tourism oriented if I end up finally going. But it just seems like it'd be kind of almost off the beaten path, which I like.
Which is all the reason why you should go in the near future, so that then you can get there before the rest of the tourists do. Or, COVID ends, whatever. Either way.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, Crista, thank you so much for this hour. This has actually had far more giggles than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. But I had a lot of fun as well.
This is really wonderful. I always put the social media and the website information on our website and our social media. And so if you're looking for Crista, you can find her at richfulthinker.com, or you could also visit us on theblackexpat.com, and we'll have all her information up. Thank you again for joining me for this episode.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
You've just listened to an episode of The Global Chatter, which is hosted by me, Amanda Bates. It is edited by Stephanie Ficcio. Don't forget to subscribe to The Global Chatter on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Instagram at The Global Chatter, or stop by Twitter and find us at Global Chat Pod. If you have a question, want to subscribe to the newsletter, or are interested in sponsoring, visit theglobalchatter.com.